This is the Ioniq 6N, the second of Hyundai's electric performance cars after the 5N, and the product of its electric motorsport programs and what it calls its Rolling Labs initiatives. So today we're going to test this car using science and this massive racetrack. We're going to be looking at boosty buttons. It's basically like digital nitrous. Drifty switches. And a dashboard disco. And you hit a rev limiter. First of all, what do we think to the way this thing looks? Now, I think it's quite quirky. I always thought the standard 6 looked like a space age banana, and this just looks like a much more angry space age banana. It has got the guts though. This thing has 641 brake horsepower and can go from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 3.2 seconds. That's a serious sports car. It's not so much the 6 as the Ioniq 666. And yes, I do think the front looks quite evil. You've got a deeper front splitter, some extra cooling, and then some vents down the side, which look really nice. You've got wider arches than the standard car to keep that electric kind of beefy look, and then some really lovely aero performance wheels, big brakes, that sort of stuff. Though I am reliably informed that these digital rear view mirrors won't make it to production because the constant heating and the little power drain for the screen actually doesn't make up for the aero gains, so it cuts the range. Then there is obviously the swan neck rear spoiler, which you really can't miss, though Hyundai does insist that this is actually more for stability than actual downforce, because this is an electric car. You don't want to create loads of downforce and loads of drag, and therefore again affect the range. Inside, it's pretty much the same as a normal Ioniq 6, so you've got a decent boot, excellent space in the rear, loads of storage, wireless charging and all the rest of it. But this car gets some nicer seats. You can see them with the little illuminated M badges in the back, and this steering wheel, which looks like it has an entire child's play park attached to it. I'll just run you through it quickly. There's a couple of buttons up here, one for the drive mode, which goes from eco to normal to sport. There's NGB, which sounds like a party drug, but I'll explain that in a second. And then there's two configurable mode buttons down here, bottom of the steering wheel, which you can have two separate setups already pre-programmed in. So you just hit a button and it's there. Then on this side, you've got indicators and lights. This side is windscreen wipers. All the buttons on this side are to do with lane keep assist and cruise control and mode switching. And this side is your telephone and all that sort of stuff. Even the gear selector is down here on the right. And then there's the paddles behind the steering wheel, which in normal modes affect the brake regeneration capability, and then on track, when you're in the right mode, they become shift paddles for a fake gearbox. And that's before we even get into the modes on the screens. Hold tight, because today's test comes to you via the letter N. So first, we have N battery. Now you can have this in 3 different settings depending on what you're doing. So you can have endurance, sprint or drag, and that basically conditions the battery to be as healthy as possible for whatever you're specifically doing. And then there's N launch control, which should do exactly what it says on the tin. So you switch the ESC off and the traction control off, and then you put it in drag mode for the battery, and then you put your foot really hard on the brake pedal and flatten the accelerator pedal, and there's a little sign up here that says LC. And then as soon as you let go of that brake pedal, it will do 0 to 62 in 3.2 seconds, apparently. So let's test it. 125 kph, 150, 170, 190, 200, 210. Woo! Yep, launch control. It does what it says on the tin. N E-Shift. Now, if I activate this on this screen here, that turns these paddles essentially into shift paddles for a fake gearbox. And when you're in ignition sound, it even has that fake backfire, and you can hit a fake rev limiter on track. So it actually does feel pretty much like a real car. Shift down, even got a bit of pop. And you hit a rev limiter. And then there's N Active Sound Plus. So if I go into N Active Sound Plus and then press that, then listen to this. That's ignition sound, so you can basically change the sound of the car to whatever you really want. There's 3 different ones. There's ignition, which sounds a bit like, I don't know, a high revving V6. Then evolution, which experience the emotions evoked by the evolutionary sound of a futuristic high performance electric vehicle. It doesn't evoke much to me, apart from some sort of weird dance party. Then there's light speed, which is transcending time and space, apparently. I mean, that's pretty awful. Now, you know I mentioned that button on the top right of the steering wheel that's called NGB? Well, that's actually N-Grin Boost. And essentially, if you press that, this car has naturally 601 brake horsepower. That will give you 641, an extra 40 brake horsepower for 10 seconds. Once you've used it for 10 seconds, it takes another 10 seconds to reset before you can use it again. It's essentially digital nitrous. Then we have the N-Torque distribution. So basically, if you put it all the way to the end, you turn in. Yeah, okay. That's very rear-wheel drive. How strange is that? It was completely flat, and then as soon as you change it all the way to the other side, it essentially becomes a rear-wheel drive car with 380 horsepower. So if I'm tucking it in down here, into second, turn it in. And then once you've found your perfect settings, which admittedly may take a while, you can just go out on a circuit and have loads of fun. And it really does work. Now the 6N has some interesting bits compared to the standard car. It's got a re-engineered chassis, it's got completely different steering geometry, and it does have a bit of a lower centre of gravity, so it should feel a little bit more sporty. And genuinely, it really does. It's also got these things called stroke sensing dampers, which are basically just an electronically controlled damping system. And I can sense a stroke just as well as the next person, but these should give you a bigger variance between, you know, going for a commute and then late braking track dives like this. And you know what? They really work. But do you know what? I get the feeling that this is more of a fast road car than an out-and-out track racer. The steering is accurate but a little bit numb, and the brakes, we're just coming to the end of the straight now, and if I hit the brakes, they are super powerful, but again, they lack much delicacy. So it doesn't feel like an out-and-out circuit racer. It feels more like a very fast road car that's a bit of a laugh on a circuit. But it is a bit of a laugh, I will give it that. I'm sort of fascinated and excited by it, but it doesn't quite hit the spot as a track car, mainly because it still feels quite heavy and quite soft. That outside front tyre is doing an awful lot of work, and you never quite get away from that. But I am having a laugh. I just think it feels like that kind of almost like Audi RS6 thing, where it's okay on a track and it's fun, but it wants to be going quickly on a road. What we've got here is a car that, when we can nail the idea of a lighter electric performance cars, the thinking, the joy, the technologies that Hyundai's coming up with are going to make for some really special electric performance cars. Until then, I think the Ioniq 6N is a fantastic car, but it's probably more a fast road weapon than a track tool.